Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to PMDC's online lecture room. I'm Associate Professor Sobia.
We'll be discussing catalytic properties of transition elements. The topic is present in textbook of chemistry for grade 12, chapter 14, D and F block elements. It is an important topic. Questions from this topic are included in previous bicep papers. Year 2014 bicep paper has the question explain the characteristic properties of transition elements. The first characteristic of transition elements is the catalytic property of transition elements. In this regard, first we will define catalyst, then location of transition elements in the periodic table, and finally reasons for the catalytic behavior of transition elements. So let's begin with the definition of catalyst. Catalyst is a substance which speeds up a chemical reaction but itself remains chemically unchanged at the end of the reaction. Students, have you ever noticed substances in your surroundings which are speeding up many processes for us? Well, there are many. For example, catalytic converter in our cars. It converts the harmful emissions of the engine into less toxic ones like water and carbon dioxide. And for this purpose, it uses catalyst. The catalyst it uses are rhodium, platinum, and palladium. Another example is in making of plastics, which uses titanium tetrachloride as catalyst. The catalyst of these two examples are platinum, palladium, rhodium, and titanium tetrachloride, and these are all transition elements. Transition elements are metals located between S and P block of the periodic table. If you look at this periodic table, right in the middle over here are the transition elements between the S block and the P block. They constitute the D block of the elements and are called transition metals. Now we are able to define transition metals. Definition: the elements which have partially filled d orbitals are called transition elements. They are all metals and they are in the middle of the periodic table, right in between S and P block. Transition elements and their compounds act as catalysts in both organic and inorganic reactions. Now let's see how transition metals behave as catalysts. The reason for the catalytic behavior of transition elements is use of d orbitals. Transition elements have vacant d orbitals. If we look at the electronic configuration of transition elements, let's say manganese, in the valence shell they have paired electrons in the 4s orbital. These 4s orbitals have 2 electrons in each of them. But if we look at the d orbitals have just one unpaired electron. An orbital can have maximum of 2 electrons. An orbital can have maximum of 2 electrons. But the d orbitals of transition elements have just 1 electron. In order to get these unpaired electrons paired up, they interact with the reactants and in this way activate the reactants and speed up the chemical reactions. Now let's see the second reason. The second reason for the catalytic behavior of transition elements is formation of interstitial compounds. Transition metals form interstitial compounds which activate the reactants, and thus the reaction occurs fast. Now let's try to understand the interstitial compounds. Interstitial is from an English word interstice, meaning small space, a gap, or a tiny hole or pores. Transition elements are solid metal. In their crystal lattice, elements are quite closely arranged. In this diagram, the green balls are representing the metal elements and they are quite compactly arranged. Still there is a small pore or a small hole or a gap between the metal atoms. Now smaller atoms, let's say hydrogen or carbon or boron, nitrogen, they occupy this small space, and in this way they get absorbed in the metal surface and activate for the reaction. The metals have small pores or gaps between them. These small pores absorb the smaller elements and thus they activate the reactants for the further reaction. Now let's have a look on the examples of transition elements. The very first example is of iron, which is used as catalyst in Haber-Bosch process for the synthesis of ammonia. Next example, vanadium pentaoxide. Vanadium pentaoxide is used as catalyst for converting sulfur dioxide into sulfur trioxide for synthesis of sulfuric acid by contact process. Next, titanium tetrachloride. It is used as catalyst for the polymerization of ethene into polythene. Next example is of nickel, platinum and palladium, which are used for the hydrogenation of unsaturated hydrocarbons to make ghee. Copper. Copper is used for the conversion of ethanol into acetaldehyde.
Another property of transition elements is alloy formation. Let's define alloy. When two or more metals mix or replace each other, the mixture is called alloy. Transition elements mix easily with one another and form useful alloys. ट्रांजिशन मेटल्स बहुत आसानी से अलॉयज़ की फॉर्मेशन कर सकते हैं क्योंकि ट्रांजिशन मेटल्स के एटम्स का साइज़ ऑलमोस्ट सेम है, तो वो क्रिस्टल लैटिस में एक दूसरे को रिप्लेस कर सकते हैं और इस तरह से अलॉयज़ की फॉर्मेशन कर देते हैं. ट्रांजिशन मेटल्स की बहुत सारी अलॉयज़ हम अपनी डेली लाइफ में इस्तेमाल भी करते हैं. फॉर एग्ज़ाम्पल कटलरी, चम्मच, छुरी, कांटे वगैरह. सिमिलरली नट्स एंड बोल्ट्स, पेच वगैरह स्टील से बनाए जाते हैं. स्टील से बनी हुई बहुत सारी अशिया हम इस्तेमाल करते हैं. एंड स्टील इज़ द अलॉय ऑफ आयरन. Here are some examples of alloys, their composition and their uses. This table is also present in your textbook. The first example is of brass, which is composed of copper and zinc, and it is used in domestic utensils, cartridges, castings and condensers. Second, bronze, made up of copper and tin. It is used for making statues, coins, bells, blades and machine parts. Next example is of steel, which is most widely used alloy. It is the alloy of iron and carbon. It is used in making cutlery, car bodies, bridges and utensils. Next one is gold, which is made up of gold and copper, and it is used to make jewelry, electric devices, tooth fillings and statues. Students, this table is present in your textbooks as well, so mark it out. It is very important for MCQs to remember the composition of these alloys. By the end of the lecture, there is an assignment in the form of the MCQs. Try out these MCQs. Best of luck.